In terms of disaster risk, none of our communities in America or the country itself is or are fully prepared to deal with disasters in any way that we might have expected. Certainly after having experienced 9/11, Katrina, and many of the other calamities we've had. And one of the points I've made is that we keep calling each one of these events a wake-up call, but they actually turn out to be more like snooze alarms, where we're kind of like, we get aroused, there's a lot of attention. We hit that snooze button, drift back off into complacency. So we're not really learning the lessons that we derive from former disasters, and we keep repeating some of the same mistakes over and over again. A lot of people think about the last disaster we had, and there's some element of fighting the last war. So the last thing that happened was, for example, Superstorm Sandy in the Northeast. Then we focus a lot of attention on that for at least for a little while, but we forget about some of the other things that we need to do. It's the answer to why that is very complicated, but it has to do with priorities, who's doing the planning, how are people making decisions about what's important to do. But I just recently read a report on the U.S. government's involvement in the response to a major earthquake in Guatemala in 1976, so 40 years ago. And the problems that were described then in our disaster response and in the response of the Guatemalan government, and in the recommendations that were being made in 76, very few of those recommendations were actually followed through. And all the problems were repeated again, over and over again in places like the Gulf during Katrina. I think we need a more coherent message from the federal government about what it would take to make the country more secure and safer in terms of major disasters. But then that has to be translated down to states and localities. This is not easy because we're in a federalist society. So the federal government has a limited amount of control over what happens in New York City or Chicago or whatever. But one of the things that we could do is by investing more money in disaster readiness, we can incentivize communities to do more and do it better. And I think that's, at the moment, one of the things that we're going to be recommending strongly.